School District. We are here today for a study session. We have a couple of items that we need to take care of to vote on, but for the most part, we're going to be hearing things tonight. We've just returned from closed session and no action was taken on anything. And so I would like to call our open session and call it to order. And I would like to ask Justin, if you will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Hand over your heart. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Justin. Mr. Grayson, sorry. Well, good evening, everybody. You may notice I am not Brent Lee. I think you all probably figured that out by now. Brent is not here tonight. He is attending a coding workshop seminar, I believe, in St. Louis, Missouri, with a number of other RUSD personnel. So he will return on Wednesday, but in his absence, I'll be running the meeting. And also Mr. Hunt is unable to make the meeting tonight, but we still have a quorum for the action items that we need to take. Just really quickly, before we get into our meeting, I did want to welcome our two RUSD students. There are career tech ed students who are in the back. You guys want to come out? We've got Michaela Dawson, no relation, although it's a great name, Michaela. And Michaela is with Poly High School Media Productions. And then we also have Liam Ogawa. And Liam is with King High Media in the graphics department. So thank you for being here and let us know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, will you? Thank you. All right, our first order of business is to, let's see. You'll have to bear with me too, because I'm not as good on this stuff as Brent is. So, okay, do we have any public input on any items not on the agenda? I didn't receive any cards, I don't believe so. Okay, moving along then, we're going to go into our study session. And tonight we will hear from, I think it's Ms. Carmen Day, regarding our data on our success indicators and how we're doing as a district. So Ms. Carmen Day, I will give you the mic. Thank you.
Vice President Locke Dawson, Dr. Hanson, esteemed board members, tonight we have an opportunity to revisit our 12 success indicators from an initial presentation that we provided back in August. And in order to do that, we're going to be looking a little bit at the instructional direction of the district to set the foundation of why the 12 success indicators. We will have an expert that joins us, Dr. Roger Yoho, who will look at some of the trends in the state, as well as some in-depth information about the dashboard so we can be well informed. We will present some comparable data as promised and also look at student group data. Approximately 3 years ago, we started talking in depth about what it takes. How do we get to a circumstance where our demographics do not determine the destiny or success of our students? And we started looking at our systems, the why, which is our portrait of a graduate, and what exactly will we do to make changes and begin to transition into all students and every student every day being successful. At that time, we started looking at our systems, and we knew that shared leadership was a key factor in developing an opportunity to dig deep into our goals, to look through inquiry at what we were doing, and in teams start to really analyze how to move forward. We specifically developed 4 core steps, one of which was the why on what is mastery, what does it look like, and how is that guaranteed curriculum provided to our students, on our instruction, on our pedagogy, specific to the needs for all students. Also building capacity around the outcomes, and finally whole system engagement. And over time you've heard bits and pieces of those, but this is just packaging it all together for you. We definitely have dug into some important research for some of the best educators with respect to DeFore on collaboration, Hattie on effective pedagogy and some systems. And recently you've heard us talk about Fullen and the work that he has done around the right drivers and the wrong drivers. The right drivers being the capacity building and versus the accountability. It doesn't mean we don't have a good system of accountability, but we focus on how do we build capacity based on the cycle of inquiry and what happens from that point. And that's part of why we've said, let's take and ensure that this is not about just 2 factors that the state says is important. And the state, through Fullen's work, has also determined that same idea, that we're not defining us as an organization and the work that we do with our students simply on 2 indicators. We are looking at, for us, all of our success indicators, and those are the ones that we're targeting to improve for our students. The collaborative efforts versus teachers working in isolation, and really even on our teams. And then technology is significant, but not nearly as important as the pedagogy, and the pedagogy that integrates the technology for effective instruction. And finally, the systemness as a whole, and that is really through our shared leadership. So I wanted to just bring that about because it takes time for substantive change to occur, but we definitely are doing the right work. This connection here really talks about the state's system of accountability, and through the LCAP and our 3 goals that you saw in the center of the shared leadership, you see that it aligns with what the state's expecting us through LCAP with respect to conditions of learning, student outcomes, and specifically engagement. And you'll notice as we start to discuss a little bit more about the dashboard that will be coming out in November, where you'll see the data, secure data, you'll notice that it makes note to say a very well-constructed LCAP will bring about the achievement that you're looking for. So that is a very big plus for us, and I know we still have a journey in that way. You see the success indicators, and what I wanted to do is just remind you of those, and we've talked in the past about how they align with the dashboard and how we report to the state. You're gonna hear a little bit more about that, but I wanted to just give you the example of you'll see this new box around the outside, and it's the college career indicators on the dashboard, and what we've done is we've broken those out to be more specific. It allows us to be more detailed in those areas and have an expectation in those areas. I like this slide because it actually takes the state dashboard, what we report on this left side, and you'll see academic performance, grad rates, suspensions, the English learner progress, the college career indicator, chronic absenteeism. Those are the way that it's communicated, but how they align to our 12 success indicators you see on the right side. So again, you see that we actually package it a little bit different. We have our academic performance, and it's covering multiple areas in academic performance. It's not just the SBAC 3 through 8 in grade 11, but we're also saying that there's significance in the reading by third, and that's one of our highest priorities in early numeracy. So we add that as local indicators. Any questions up to now as we transition into the little bit of learning around dashboards?
I don't think so. Please continue.
Okay. At this time, I'd like the opportunity to introduce you to Dr. Roger Yoho. He's actually been in central office as an accountability expert director in Corona Norco for about 40 years. But we asked him to come today because he has a great deal of experience also at the state level. He's been part of Public Schools Accountability Act. He's been a technical assessment group on state assessments, and recently technical design group for state and federal specific to the dashboard. So we wanted him to come up and give us a little bit more information about the dashboard and also the state trends.
Thank you. Good evening. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've lived in Riverside for 40 years, and it's the first time I've ever been to one of your board meetings. Shame on me, yes, you're absolutely right. It's such a joy to be here with you today. Primarily what I have an opportunity to share with you is about the accountability system for the state of California. And what you see on the slide that's showing now is just a tidbit of the major shift that's happening in California when it comes to accountability. But I'd like to start off by indicating that accountability is not in a vacuum. Historically, if you go all the way back to the 1980s, every state in the United States, of course, was doing whatever it felt was needed for its local state. Because of the way the United States Constitution is written, the states have the responsibility for education. The only way that the federal government can actually entice us to do things is by giving us dollars. Other than civil rights issues, they get us to do things by saying, if you accept our money, you have to jump through the hoops that we want you to go through. So every state had its own accountability, had its own assessment system, had its own curriculum. All the way back in the first President George Bush tried to get some money together for something called Goals 2000 to try to urge a more standardized way of moving forward, especially with parent engagement. That didn't really go too far. President Clinton tried to get standardized testing that would be across the United States. That didn't go very far because every state had its own way of doing business and its own curriculum, what they were teaching at different stages. The reason I'm saying that, it was California in the late 1990s. In 1997, that came up with a much more standardized way of looking at English language arts and mathematics in 1997, and they did the same thing with new academic standards in 1998. It takes a while for the state to shift. It's like having a large ocean liner that's going across a major ocean, and it's got a head of steam going up. Really, it's got a lot of momentum, and it takes a while to shift. And so California took a while to shift in the early 2000s, where late 1990, in March of 1999, for the first time, California had a larger way of looking at accountability called the Public Schools Accountability Act, which we call the API, Academic Performance Index. It was just based on test scores. It's only test scores. And it wasn't in all subjects, but it was at least in some subjects. So what happened in the late 1990s in California is it established a standardized way of looking at curriculum, more rigorous across the entire state, and established an accountability system that was a state accountability system. 2001, the federal government wanted to do the same thing. It wanted to push states into having more rigorous and uniform standards and accountability. So they passed in 2001 the No Child Left Behind. And from that, we had the federal accountability system called Adequate Yearly Progress. Adequate Yearly Progress was very different from the state of California's API system. API said, hey, we'd like you to get to this magic number called 800. If you're below that, we'll set a specific target for you. We will set your targets for you at the state, and go for it. The federal government said, no, we have certain markers. We want you to pass all those markers, and if you don't pass all those markers, then you have failed your AYP. A district your size had at least 42 different requirements for adequate yearly progress for the federal government. If you didn't make just one of those targets, you were considered a failure. Absolutely remarkable. You could make 41 out of the 42 and still not pass. So over time, what has happened is the Common Core State Standards were passed by the State Board of Education on August 2nd of 2010. After that starts the same progression at the state level that they did in the late 1990s and early 2000s, where not only did you have a new curriculum, you had to go through an adoption process. You had to change the instructional materials. That takes time. School districts, your district, the Corona-Norco Unified, that I had an opportunity to work with, it takes time, it takes money, there's professional development involved. All of that is going on now. I say that again because accountability is not in a vacuum. So the new accountability in the state of California, as you well know, was the local control funding formula that was passed in 2013 had a provision that said there was going to be a new state accountability system. The State Board of Education has been working feverishly ever since then to create a new accountability system. Meanwhile, in 2015 and 2016, districts like yours had to try to guess what to look. And from the state perspective, it was okay for you to guess because they were throwing the responsibility and giving you the option of being, for your local district to measure whatever it thought was appropriate to measure. And you do that through your LCAP. The only real guidance you were given for the beginning of the LCAP process, and this is the 4th year of LCAP, was the fact that they said they wanted, pupil conditions of learning, pupil outcomes. They wanted to have engagement, but they didn't really specify specifically what that was. So what your district did, I thought, was really right on because it came up with what you have as your success indicators. As it turns out, because you all were paying attention to what was happening at the state and how things were evolving and changing, and what you had for your success indicators actually is the dashboard that eventually the state comes up with. Not word for word, but exceedingly close. To the extent that if I go back to slide 5, and it's hard to read, but on the left-hand side, you're going to see those 3 indicators that they're asking you to do your LCAP with. They're the social emotional area, which is conditions of learning, which is on the top. Then you've got pupil outcomes in the middle, and then you've got engagement. Your district already created your success indicators, which does everything that ended up in the dashboard that is about to be released. And so this is a beautiful slide because it really does show exactly how things have matched up with the state's dashboard. So the new dashboard, the new way that the accountability in the state of California is, it's not just looking at one measure. It's not just looking at test scores. It's looking at a much broader perspective of what happens in the school system. Beautiful. When my kids were going to school, I visited the school. I knew what the test scores were, but I wanted to know a lot more about what was happening on campus. What other opportunities? What other things are happening on campus? And what the dashboard does is it's saying, yeah, the state understands that, and its new dashboard indicators are actually a much broader perspective. It also helps to identify areas of need, particularly for subgroups. A subgroup is any group of students that has 30 or more students. So the different ethnic groups, special education, English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged. If a school or a district has at least 30 students in those categories, then that's going to be a significant subgroup. And what's beautiful about the new dashboard is that it will identify where all the different groups are. But it does more than that. It does something exceedingly important. Unlike the API, where the state said to what your district was, it said what your year-to-year targets were, and not like the adequate yearly progress from the federal government that said, here's just a certain line you have to cross, and if you don't, you fail. It's incredibly important to know that the state of California is emphasizing continuous improvement, continuous improvement, continuous improvement. The federal government will have targets, and I'll show you that in just a moment, on certain indicators. But the State Board of Education is emphasizing, along with the California Department of Education, it's all about where are you now, setting targets for the future, and having continuous improvement. That is where they're going. And so it's a beautiful system, I think, that they have created. On the next slide, They're trying to make sure that they're very transparent to the public as to what's happening in schools and in school districts. And so they've kind of come up with a consumer report type of way of looking at how school districts are doing on the different indicators. So you have red at the bottom, which is the very lowest, orange, yellow, green, and blue being the highest. Green is considered a state target. That's where they're hoping school districts will eventually get to, if they're not already there, to get to green. Yellow is approaching. And you might say, why in the world are the different pie shapes, how come there's red's got one, orange has got two, yellow's got three, how come that kind of pattern's going? It's because some people are colorblind and they can't see the different colors, but just looking at the size of the pie, you can tell what's going on. The different indicators, all those metrics that you have in your LCAP, all those things that you have that go up to your success indicators, okay, they all lead to the state's large indicators. And on those indicators, what you're going to see is the high school graduation. It's the cohort graduation. You're going to see academic performance, that's actually test scores versus academic performance. Then you've got suspension. You've got English learner progress indicator, you've got the college and career index, and eventually you're going to have chronic absenteeism. On the next slide, what you'll see is the way your dashboard looks right now if you go on the California Department of Education's website. But this is a really important point. Because this new accountability system is so different, because it is multiple measures, because it is looking from one year to the next, because it is doing so, it was so different that what they did at the state was a very nice thing. What they did is last March, although they were using very old data, in some cases all the way back to the 2013-14-15 school year, what they did is they just said to educators and the public, this is the kind of accountability system that we're going to have. It came out last March, and so it will indicate how many subgroups you have at the district level or a particular school level. It will actually tell you how many subgroups happen to be in the lower ranges, red or orange. Again, I want to emphasize this is very old data, and it's just out there so that people will get used to the idea. This is what it looks like. Ask your questions. How did we derive this? How did we figure this out? How did we figure that out? That type of thing. But it's just trying to get people used to it before it goes operational. When the state says something goes operational, it's like a race where you come up to the line, you're getting ready, set, boom, the gun goes off and you start running. That's where you start from. Where you're starting from really is going to come out in November of this year. It's just about a month from now, maybe a little bit more than a month. Well, right about a month from now. You'll get these indicators, and it will be your starting point. It's going to say this is where you're starting, and every district will look at where they're starting. They're going to look at their strengths. They're going to look at their weaknesses. They're going to sit there and set targets where they want to go in the future. So what the state does is it's saying that it's going to have, you know what, I didn't know it did that, so I'm going to go back. It's going to emphasize, this new accountability system is going to emphasize something called status and then change. Status is where you are right now. Change is just the difference between what happened last year and this year. So when this comes out in November, the status will be your 2017 data, let's say in Smarter Balanced, so your Smarter Balanced scores in 2017, and then the change will actually show the difference between the 2016 scores and the 2017 scores. So each one of them has a lower region and a higher region. So if you're looking at status, it will start down on the bottom, and it will go up. And what we'll do, you'll notice that there's 5 rows, and there's actually a range of scores that will indicate this is the red, or this is the bottom level. Here's the second level. Here's the third level. They'll actually have ranges. Same thing going for change. It'll go from your left to your right, going across, And it will go, the middle will actually say there was no change. And then going to the right, it'll be a little bit of change. And then going to the extreme right hand, say significant or a lot of change, high change. Starting again from the middle where it says maintain, if you go one step to the left, then it's going to say from the middle, it will be a little bit of a change going down. And then if you go all the way to the left, it's significant going down. So what the state has done is it's used those color codes that I mentioned a minute ago. That's kind of like consumer report. And it's actually said where the different color codes are. So that it can say, here's the level 1, which is red, orange, 2, yellow, you're approaching the state standard, green being where the state would like you to aim, and wow, if you can get the blue, woohoo, that's really good. So now you can see that your success indicators really do match up beautifully with the dashboard. You might say, well, the very top star there is one that says attendance. That's because your district has done something incredibly wise. Instead of calling it suspension, which means the child's not in school, they're not getting instruction, they're not learning the standards, they potentially are falling behind. What your school district is emphasizing is not the negative, it's doing the positive. Attendance is you're actually physically, the child's in the classroom. This is beautiful. They're in the classroom, they have an opportunity to learn, to keep up, and the more kids that are in school and learning, why? Of course, they're going to succeed. So then the other indicators, you see the stars are the 5 indicators that you see that the state has. I told you the academic indicator is test scores, and so it's actually broken into 2, the English language arts and mathematics Smarter Balance scores. Eventually, it'll be more than just Smarter Balance. It will actually be the science exams, and the exams both in English language arts, mathematics, and science that are for students with profound or cognitive disabilities. Those are not included right now, but they will be in the future. And then you've got the English learner progress indicator. That is a really fantastic, and that's my opinion, indicator. And the reason is because if you remember the old AYP, it didn't even have the English learner in there. It had a subcategory called English learner subgroup, but it didn't have a major indicator. It was just English and math test scores. When you get an API, again, it had a subgroup called for English learners, but it really didn't give you credit for students that were going to be RFEP. So you had a successful child, and they went from EL category to RFEP. You were not given credit for that. And you weren't given credit for the success you might have had with long-term English learners. And even what you used to have with English learners is you actually had a different accountability system. It was called Title III, and that report came out at a different time. It was not emphasized as much as it could have been, or perhaps even should have been. And so what the state of California did, but even before the federal government did, is it said, no, how well the English learners are doing is critically important, and it's going to be one of our major indicators, and that's why you see the star there. And which is really nice for your success indicators, is that the College and Career Index has been split up into the 4 major categories that actually make up the state's category, College and Career Index. What I'm trying to say to you is, everybody in the state's going to want to do what you just did. Because they're going to get one number, let's say 50. They're going to say 50% of the students are prepared for college and a career. And you have to actually look into the dashboard. You have to look at what makes up this thing called College and Career Index. What makes it up is what you have boxed. It's all those different indicators. It's the A through G eligibility. It's getting college credit for high school kiddos. It's getting the pathways, career technical education pathways. Everything you've got in that little box and how well students are doing on the AP tests or IB, all of that is what makes up the College and Career Index. So you've got it beautifully already out there. Those who know me will know that I'm saying the same thing to the Board of Education in Corona Norco, and I did forever. I just keep trying to remind us we're in education. It's not fast food. It's not fast food. Things change slowly, and we need to be patient. Our natural inclination was to want everything instantaneously. We do a little something, boom, we want the results right away. It just doesn't happen that way. What we're hoping for is like this Amazon 5-year stock market illustration. Over a 5-year period, the stock was started kind of on the low side, and from day to day, sometimes it went up, sometimes it went down, up, down, up, down. But over a long period of time, it went up significantly, to the extent that really Roger wishes he had bought the stock at the beginning. In most districts, including your district, and Corona and Norco did as well, when you started doing the old California standards test, the percent of students at or above proficient was low. But over the next 10 years, it grew, and grew, and there was just significant growth. So my point is, it takes time. Think about what is happening across the entire state. The state finally has English language arts materials that are actually matched up with the Common Core state standards for California. It took time for the state to have those developed, approved, for districts to go through their local area of figuring out what materials they actually want to do, for us to have money. I don't know how much money you all spent, but it's incredibly expensive. It's so extremely expensive to get new materials. It takes time for professional development, for teachers to get acclimated not only to the curriculum, but now to the new materials. There's always going to be little holes, and you have to make adjustments as time goes on. It takes time. In fact, if you made a decision tonight, you're not going to really see the results for 3 or 4 years. That's just reality everywhere. That's not just here, it's not Corona Norco, it's not Riverside County, it's across the entire state. It takes time. I submit for your consideration that any school district, including the one that I had a privilege of working with, Corona Norco, they did a major adoption, and they're going to do another one for instructional materials. And I've already, the superintendent there has already told the local Board of Education, we may have very little changes in test scores for a year or 2 or 3 until everything really catches up. And so just don't be surprised. It just takes time. But then some really neat things happen. In this slide, what's happened is you're aware, of course, that the federal government passed in very, very late 2015, in December 10th of 2015, it passed a federal law called Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. And as the federal government was going through the regulation process and all that type of thing, which took an awful lot of time, they eventually came up where they're saying to states, like California, okay, every state has to come up with a state target in certain indicators like graduation, English learner, and the academic test scores like in Smarter Balanced English and math. So what you see with that star, and I know it's a bit of a challenge to read, but if you look at the status going from the bottom to on the extreme left, going from the bottom to the top, there's different ranges. Okay, and what those scores are, it's called distance from level 3. There's different, as you're very much aware, the Smarter Balanced test scores, there's actually 4 levels. Okay, standard not met, nearly met, met, or exceeded. Okay, so it's level 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, well, what it does is says level 3, standard met, is grade level. So what the state is saying is, okay, how far are you from grade level? That's what you see on the axis going up. How far, on the average for your district, for each subgroup, for the school, where are you? Okay, and then going across, it's just what's the change from one year to the next. So what you see is where that star is where the California, the State Board of Education has approved a target to fulfill ESSA requirements. The State Board of Education has said in 7 years, starting now, 7 years from now, that's where our state is aiming to go. Okay, it's aiming to go. However, the State Board of Education feels very, very strongly that it's the local community, it's the local Board of Education that actually approves local targets. Local targets. And so a lot of the districts that I'm aware of, what they'll do is they realize it takes a while to get going because of the professional development, and it takes time for the adoptions to actually get not only in, but implemented, and everybody to get used to it, for this huge ocean liner to actually change course as it's going across the ocean. It takes time. So they're setting reasonable targets for about 3 years. And then just like you do with LCAP, an LCAP is a 3-year plan, but you adjust it every year based on the new current data you have. And so some districts, that's what they're thinking about doing. And so they're aiming for the state target. This one happens to be English language arts. Next slide happens to be mathematics, same concept. The ranges on the side are different, both for status and change, because it's all built on how scores were the distributions across the state. But still, so what districts are thinking about doing is literally having targets for English and for math, because those are the ones that, the state had to have targets, and so their local school system is also trying to have that target, have a target. The next indicator does not have a star, okay, and it is the suspension, which you're doing in a much more positive way by saying keeping kids in school, attendance. And so this one's kind of a unique indicator because naturally you want to have lower percentages or numbers of kids getting suspended and have them in classes. And so the other indicators will say we want to have higher percentage of test scores, go up higher. We want more kids at grade level, or we want more graduates, or we want more kids that are doing really well with English learner, progression to English mastery. Not in suspension, suspension, it's the opposite. You want to go low. And so there is no state target because it wasn't required by ESSA. However, school districts frequently have their own targets. And again, it can be an attendance target. It doesn't have to be, because if they're in school, you're going to be reducing. The next one I have is graduation. There is a graduation target, and I didn't put there's no star on this one, but right where you see the orange cell being outlined, that is the state target that the State Board of Education did approve. And so, and again, that fulfills ESSA. What's unique about this, folks, is you're going to have 2, not 1, cohort graduation figure. And it can get really confusing. In the past, there was only 1 cohort graduation. It was a 4-year cohort graduation. It was like for your district or any school district, it included all seniors. However, what's happened here in the state of California, what this 5x5 was actually built on, excluded certain schools and certain students to come up with a target. And the reason is because different students have different needs. For example, the new graduation, or maybe the second graduation figure that you're going to see, is actually the one in the dashboard. It'll always be a higher number because it's going to exclude continuation schools. It's going to continue any special education schools that are working with profoundly disabled students. And there's certain categories of schools, juvenile hall schools. There's certain types of schools that are excluded because the state realizes the needs of those students, including students that are really credit deficient. Sometimes to help meet those needs of those kids, they're put in unique environments. They go to continuation school, for example. And so the state is actually developing a second accountability that goes along with this dashboard, different indicators for those to show success for those schools. You won't see that new alternate dashboard yet. It's actually, technically, the state will say it's going to be part of this dashboard system, but the indicators will be different because it might be, let's say, helping kids to catch up credits. It'll help kids to actually be in school. We don't know exactly what the indicators are going to be, but it's that they will. It'll come in about a year. The difference, let me see if I can give you a real-life example. In a school district, you might have on the cohort graduation for the dashboard, which is your district and comprehensive high schools. It will have, excluding those continuation schools and others, you might have a 96% graduation rate. And when you go to DataQuest at CDE's website, and you go and it's all, everybody's combined together, no matter if they're in a continuation school or special ed school that kids are only getting certificates of completion, that type of thing. When it's all jammed together, you might only have a 91 or 92%. So there's always going to be a difference. The last indicator that I have an opportunity to talk to you about will be the College of Career Index. And again, this is the well-prepared and all the things that you've already have delineated out in your success indicators are actually in the College of Career Index. The next slide, which is my last slide, is just an illustration of, again, looking at multiple measures. The state is going to use multiple tests. It's looking at things in a lot of different ways. You're going to have a shift from the L to LPAC, from the CELT test, and you're going to be shifting to the LPAC test. You should, I'm just telling you right now, everybody in the state should be aware that your scores for English learners will either stall or go backward a little bit because the test is a little harder. It's a little challenging. However, you'll get credit for your long-term English learners that do well, start succeeding, and you'll get credit for your students that go from EL to RFIP. Also, this slide just indicates again that you're going to have other tests that will eventually be in the accountability system.
Thank you, Dr. Yo.
I'm sorry, can you take a question from Mrs. Alave, please?
Thank you. Very well, okay. You have a great historical perspective on this, and you were saying correctly, over the past 25, 30 years, we've had multiple systems, but you think that we are seeing some positive results after all of this, convoluted pathways. And so now, what do you think? Is this the right iteration for the state, and are we now at a system that's going to work?
Great question. I personally think so, because it's looking at a broader perspective of what's happening on campus or in a school district. It's not just one little thing, like a test score. And I think that, I really appreciate you asking, that dashboard's going to continue to be improved, and there'll be new things added to it over the next 3 or 4 years. For example, the students that get the biliteracy seal, that's going to be included in the dashboard. You've got students in your district that get the California Golden State Seal Merit Diploma, that's going to be included. There's a whole number of things that are going to be included that will help to even make it more, a much better picture. So I definitely think California is going in the right direction. And at the same time, the standards are far more rigorous. And that's good because then our students will be able to compete with the international economy.
Is it a case of you keep making the tests harder because you're pushing the standards, but you keep moving the finish line further out? So do we never get to see the results, really?
It's going to take, it will take a few years before it really settles in, 3 or 4 more years, but it will get there. I think that one of the ways I like to describe it is with the old standards in math, students needed, let's say in middle school, they needed to know how to do algebra. And so even when I was a kid, back in the Middle Ages with the dinosaurs, and even with the 1997 standards, students were taught formulas. Okay, there's the formula, can you solve it for X, that kind of thing. But they really couldn't take the algebra and go out in the world and actually apply that algebra, or even see that that's where I could use my algebra. So yes, the standards are far more rigorous now, because what we're trying to do is say there's a depth, you have to understand not only how to do the calculation, but how can you use that math in the real world? And that's what most of the world, the countries that are succeeding financially, economically, their students can go out and apply the math. And so, yes, we're getting more stringent standards, and the tests are reflecting that rigor, but at the same time, it's going to make our country much more competitive in a world economic environment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please take a question from Michelle Boulos, our student board member.
Okay. So I'm just a little confused. When the state looks at these different standards, is there a weighting to each standard, or are we supposed to look at them each on their own, like distinctly?
You mean these indicators?
Yes.
Oh, that was a great question, because the state sit there and kicked that around for about 2 years before they came up with an answer. And so what they're doing is they're saying, no, it's not going to be all put together and have one magic number that combines all 5 indicators and says, here's the overall, just like they used to, something called the API, where you had like an 800 or you got it 750 or something. They're not going to do that. And the reason is because every community has different needs and it has different priorities. And so because the state really wants the local community to have the flexibility to meet the needs of the students that they know best. The state doesn't know your kids, and it realizes that. So it wants you to have the flexibility to emphasize the indicators the way you want them to be. And for the few indicators that the federal government has, the state have targets for, we'll try to get to those targets, but how we do that and how fast we do that is completely up to us. So no, every community will have a different way of weighting and looking at those. You have some school districts that have very few English learners, for example, very few. And so they're not going to be really emphasizing the English learner progress indicator very much, but maybe their graduation rate isn't as good. So no, they're going to look at them independently and let you, the board, figure out your priorities.
Can I add? Plus, in the state accountability system, if there are multiple reds that a district has in the dashboard, then that isn't kind of how they bring it together as far as supporting districts or sites. Do you want to say anything?
Right. Well, again, because of the federal government's Every Student Succeeds Act, one of the provisions of that is that we have to, in the state of California, every state has to identify the lowest 5% of schools in the state that are Title I schools, to identify them for either assistance or even potentially intensive intervention, assistance or intervention. And so what they're looking at is the number of indicators you have that are in red. If you're all in red, or if you have all red and one orange, especially if it's multiple years, then someone's going to knock on and say, hey, do you need help? And in some cases, they're going to say, no, you need help and we're coming. So, yep.
Thank you. Thank
You
you again.
finished, Michelle? Yes? Okay, thanks. All right, Ms. Carmen Day, I think you're up for the next portion.
I want to continue on with some comparability. We had talked about districts potentially for our success indicators, and we're going to look at 2 specific areas, but as the dashboards are out and we have confirmed data, we'll be doing some more comparability as well, but we're just looking in the 2 areas of the SBAC right now. Just reminding us that the state's target is a 3 or a 4. And wanted to give you a little bit of demographics between the state, the county, and Riverside Unified, just to point out that we really are more similar in the area of comparison to the county. And then I want to look at the 15 largest districts in this next slide together and give you an idea exactly of where we are. So let me just, in this slide, look at it for a moment. You'll see the size of the district ranking. You'll see which district it is, and then you'll see the SBAC broke into the 3 and the 4 for a total of exceeded or met the standards. You'll see the color of the state, and then we're in green. You'll see the county just below us. And then you'll also see a couple of districts, San Juan Unified and Sacramento City. And they have a little red dot by them because in comparison, their demographics probably mirror ours the closest. So we thought we would give you an opportunity to see where they are landing. And so the demographics being in size, socioeconomics, and EL students. And that's what that looks like. You also see the same data for math reported here. And this chart actually shows you in Riverside County our comparison to other districts. And again, we're in green, the state's kind of gold, and the county in blue.
So you're combining the two met and exceeded in the yellow. The column is the expression of the
Correct.
two, correct? Okay.
Met and exceeded.
And then you're using that for the comparison and the ranking.
That's why the
order of-
ranking isn't, it looks better in some if you just look at Met, but we combine the two to put the ranking together.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then you'll see that again for math. In the next slide, you'll see the EAP. Recall that is the early assessment program that used to be in place strictly with an additional test and then items on the 97 state standards test. And now what we do, what their state is doing is just looking at MET and college ready as MET as a 3 and college ready as a 4. And so you'll see that same ranking. And why that was a point of interest for us is you may see a district up there that's been touted for their A through G completion, but they're quite a bit lower than we are. And I think that this EAP is significant to see that discrepancy that we should be matching. You know, if we say we're eligible for college, hopefully we can be ready for college as well. That's our goal, obviously.
Please, can you take a question from Dr. Hansen or a comment?
Just a comment.
I was worried.
No. And just a comment.
I hope I can.
Just a comment for the EAP so the board understands. Just our juniors in high school are taking this particular test. And again, you know that we want to monitor the kids who are in A through G classes. Those are the 15 courses, and to get credit, you need to be in there and pass those classes with a C or higher. So that's good. And again, up and down the county and the state, we have folks, as they should, saying, look at our high A through G. However, the EAP measures, are the kids ready for college based on that test? And so it's one thing to get a C or higher in a class. It's another thing to have a test that's consistent across the state that says, okay, are you ready? And so just keep that in mind. And so as we drill the data down more deeply in the district, we will continue to look at A through G. We're also going to take a look at how many of our kids are we preparing and ready for college. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question for you, though, too. It seems very loud tonight. I'm sorry, but...
I'm actually grateful for it.
Okay. So I think a lot of folks might be aware that the state this year, the Cal states have sort of taken a different tack in how they define or how they classify and put students into remedial classes. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how that might impact some of these measures, if at all.
I don't think that it will impact these measures because this is where we're providing either a conditional or guaranteed acceptance or enrollment into college level coursework. Mm-hmm. What it does impact is, for example, she's making reference to removing the math placement test at the Cal State. I think that could be a support to having students come in and being able to experience grade level opportunity for mastery, because there is research that says the more you remediate, the more you remediate. It's pretty simple, but it's true. And I think I actually applaud the CSU system for looking at that and saying, okay, maybe there's something valid to this if we keep losing our kids. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be something for us to keep an eye on as well.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll see here the math displayed in the same way. Right now, I'm going to move into the actual success indicators by student groups. And before I do that, I just want to make note that we're going to go through each. You'll see the star for that particular indicator. And you'll notice that when we get to the English learner proficiency, because Dr. Lewis will be going deeper in that one, we're going to be letting him tell the English learner story near the end of the presentation. So we're going to just head through each of these. I also want to make note, so we'll look at each of the portions. You'll see the target up there, but I want to remind us, in August, we talked specifically, I believe, President Lee asked us about the targets and how we set them, and we had talked about how we need to refine how they are set to be reachable and based on analytics, so we will have a consultant assisting us with that this year. So I do want to make note of that before we begin. And then on some of these, you'll also see where it says internal reporting. The reason this says internal reporting is because it is average daily attendance, and it's something that's not exactly what the dashboard's going to be putting out, it's how we're putting it out for this indicator. On the far left, you see the blue, and the blue is actually what our measure was in 2016 and 17. And then each of the bars next to this blue are our student groups, okay, by ethnicity and comprehensive programs. And I'm just going to click to, there we go. This then indicates a year, in the last year, growth. So attendance was actually up 0.2%, which translates to $600,000 for our district. And that's a positive thing, of course. I also want to make mention for this particular, I'm not going to say it every time, but this is the one I'm going a little bit slower on so I can make sure everyone's with us on. Part of our goal when we talk about demographics don't determine the destiny or success of our students really is about getting every student over the bar. So those targets over time will be crucial for us as we refine our accountability system. And I think that's important to make note. That's part of the equity piece, or the box sometimes that you have to stand the student on to see the game. I don't know if you remember Steve Comm with that analogy. It was beautiful. So that's attendance. Now we're going to look at reading by third, and it's the same look. The only thing I would add on this slide is our summer literacy program has had a huge impact, and you'll see a substantial growth here. And remember, summer literacy last year yielded us about 73% of our kids who were part of that program did not summer slide. And this year, our data, it was even more remarkable. We served 500 more students, and 77% of them did not summer slide. 25% of that 75% actually grew. So it's amazing data program that's working for us.
Can you please take a question from Mrs. Alavi?
Thank you. When I'm looking at this reading by third grade, what exactly am I seeing? That 71.1% of our third graders have passed the Dibbles test? What exactly am I being told by that?
So they're at benchmark or above in
On
the
the
dibbles.
dibbles.
In the dibbles.
On the
Thank you.
dibbles.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for asking the question. I appreciate it. But
Okay.
yes, on the dibbles.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one is early numeracy. And I'll start out by letting you know this looks higher. It is an actual proficiency on a grade level problem solving task. So it's not like a traditional test. It's through Silicon Valley Math Initiative, and it's called the Mathematics Assessment Collaborative. And so this is, at the current point, our baseline year. We're also definitely looking at each of these definitions when we're refining our accountability system in Riverside. The next one you did get to see, but not by student group, is the SBAC in language arts. Growth from the previous year. The next one is the math. Next is the 4 college and career indicators within the index for college and career. And the first 3 are going to look a little bit different, so I just want to point that out to you. You will see the number of students on this slide in each of the student groups, and then you'll see the actual percentage of 9th through 12th graders who are enrolled in one or more AP or IB courses. Oh, I'm sorry, career pathways. I'm ahead of myself. And this again is internal reporting.
I'm sorry, Ms. Carmody, so that doesn't necessarily just reflect CTE courses, but it can, so these are not just CTEs, or are they?
These in particular are just CTE
Okay.
courses. Okay, and now you'll see the advanced placement and IB enrollment. And this is also fashioned after similar to the last slide. You will see on the left blue bar the percentage of students out of 9th through 12th graders taking coursework. And then you'll see the student groups.
We have a question from our student board member.
Wonderful.
As for the 42% target, excuse me, as for the 42% target, what is that indicating?
Well, that would be, see where at the bottom there where it says 23.7? Mm-hmm. That would mean that our target for 16-17 was 42%.
Enrolled or?
Of students 9 through 12 enrolled.
Okay.
However, this is part of why the question came up about how are you setting your targets? Are some of them even reachable? And so we've definitely began this discussion, so thankful for the question. And the next one is our last one that's fashioned after that same look as far as number of students.
Okay, hold on just one sec. Mrs. Alvey has a question.
Sorry, a little follow-up question to our AP IB enrollment. So that does not indicate that they've actually passed with the test,
Correct.
just that they've taken the course.
This particular metric was on taking the course. However, we still look at that as a metric in the LCAP as far as pass. But for the indicators, we're really trying to encourage access and allow pushing students to the rigorous AP and IB curriculum.
Thank you.
And then going back to the dual college enrollment, again, it is fashioned after the same idea, but it's a baseline year. We had 68 students participate, and you see the student groups. And again, this is internal reporting. In the last, in the college career indicators, you'll see.
Sorry, I'm sorry. So I'm assuming that the 68 and those are absolute numbers, is that right?
I'm sorry, back at dual college enrollment?
Yeah, that's a total number, right? That's not a,
Correct,
that's a total number of students?
students.
Okay, thank you.
And we do have a lofty target to have at least 1/3 of our seniors to have some kind of college credit by the time they leave us. And I'm optimistic that's going to happen. Okay, and then here you see the A through G eligibility. I want to make note that this is internal reporting. It's an estimate at this time, but that we will know soon in November, as you heard Dr. Yoho state. And it's the same as we previously have noted. So this goes back to reporting with our growth at the bottom. The left bar is the percentage, and then the percentage of each of the student groups.
Mrs. Alvey?
Sorry, I'm still trying to see what each thing is actually measuring. So in this, are we saying that 51.5% of our high school students are taking at least one A through G course? Is that how you're monitoring?
But much better than that, it means that 51.5% of our students meet A through G eligibility requirements, including a C or better in their coursework.
So this
So
is
they're taking
post-
an
after.
A through G course and they're doing C or better in that
Right,
course.
because that's part of the eligibility for the regents, is that they have a C or better in their coursework. It's actually fantastic data.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Hanson.
That's really,
Are you okay?
Reminding us that it is internal and that it'll be out next month.
To get your question answered, Mrs. Howley. Okay.
Thank you. And this one's a little bit different as well. So you'll see this is 15-16 data. And so we do not have it for the last year. It will be out. And the metrics for this are rather complicated. So it is students who start in the 9th grade, who graduate 4 years later in its cohort. And I want to make note of this and how it would look different depending upon, so this is the data quest information, one of the two ways that Dr. Yoho discussed would be reported. So this includes alternative settings. The one that will be reported through the dashboard will be, I'm assuming, quite a bit higher. And then we have to keep in mind that would not include the alternative sites data.
Mrs. Alvey?
sorry about this. So I did ask Dr. Hanson about this. We now have this program of graduating students in the summertime, right? After they've taken that extra unit that they were missing. So is that never acknowledged on the dashboard, that extra group of kids that graduate?
It will be acknowledged in our data, and as far as what is reported in the dashboard, yes, that will be coming out in the August in the future. Right now, obviously, it's not in August.
So they will
it's already
take that into account?
Yes.
Okay,
they will.
that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Excellent.
If I might here, and Dr. Yoho mentioned this, and if you want to show the next clip, Mrs. Carmody, that shows the growth. So this is all the kids 9 through 12, the cohort right now, we're 89.3%. Going forward, though, they're going to pull out the comprehensive high schools, and you've heard me publicly say that. We've done that in our comprehensive high schools. We're about a 95% graduation rate. But those who are at 91%, they'll be at, probably 96%. And then about a year from now, then they're going to pull out just the alternative schools too, because we don't want those kids to be lost. We want to make sure that if kids go in that program, we're also graduating them. So what you'll see in the November dashboard that comes out is just our comprehensive high schools, and we estimate it's going to be around that 95% rate. A year from now, they'll show us the continuation schools, and I just want to publicly make those connections because I've made those publicly with you before, and also community groups. And so we see a change in graduation rate coming out this November. Okay?
Thank you. The next one that you see will be our student engagement. And of course, we use the Gallup for student engagement. The reason this one looks a little bit different is for the first time this year, as we measure student engagement, we will be able to report out by student group. You'll notice kind of something that looks interesting, like we had this big dip, but I want to remind us that in 15-16, Gallup reestablished and removed well-being as one of the 3 areas of measure and added aspirational entrepreneur aspirations and financial literacy. And although we measure engagement here, they did also re-baseline their engagement survey. So that's why you see it change. So the real change is from 15-16 to 16-17 because it was reestablished. I also want to make note that we had a grand mean change that was an increase of 0.04, which is a growth, and that across our nation, the grand mean was actually declined by a greater number. So our district increased engagement for our students at a time when across our nation it was declining, and I think that's really significant to make note of.
Ms. Carmody, was the measure used in 14-15 the same as the measure used in 16-17? Was it the same instrument?
It was not. At the time that they changed to the two other areas that I mentioned, entrepreneurial spirit and financial literacy, they also adjusted the engagement questions, and so they reestablished the baseline for 15-16.
So 55, at 14, 15 is kind of irrelevant. It's not really.
Not really relevant, but we
Yeah,
wanted to report
it's not
consistently in
comparable.
all slides, and that's why we put it up there and
Right.
wanted to make note of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Here you just see a one-year growth. I want to make note of the colors. I mean, the green is growth from 0.1 or even 0.01 up. And then the white, where it's clear in early numeracy, for example, means that we have a baseline year, or in graduation rate that we did not report for that year yet, for 16-17. And then you'll see the orange means that we had a decliner. I will also make note that when you see the numbers for AP and dual enrollment, that they're reported by an increase in students, just in case. You can see there's no percentage there, but I just wanted to make note of that. And then I want to wrap up my portion of the presentation by just kind of bringing back this idea of the systems work that we're doing across the board is really the place in where we intend to get the impact, to make sure that we're focusing on the right things, that we're making sure that when we look at the data, we're looking at it with respect to building capacity around the outcomes and not saying, oh, those results, but what are we doing about it? Where are there places that there are potential gaps, and how do we fix that and at the same time move our district for all students forward? You'll see some of the bullets, and one is just implementing actions and services. That's one way of trying to ensure that we can get all students, every day over the bar. And then engaging our district in a data journey. The reason I make note of that is because we want to immerse ourselves more in data across the board. You know, the state took a break. We wanted our teachers to have the ability to be flexible, take challenges and risks as they implement the new state standards. And so we intend to, we'd like to put out like a success indicator a month with all the data district-wide, something new that we haven't done with an email. The first one to make note of the fact that we want to build capacity around the outcomes. So, so I wanted to make notion of that. I've already mentioned about the idea of having a very in-depth review regarding the indicators and the targets so that we can continue to improve on knowing where we're at and immersing ourselves in that. We are working on something that we're really excited to share with you, and that is the creation of an internal dashboard where we can get real-time data across the board for each of our success indicators, some of which, for example, attendance might have two areas that data will umbrella other areas, and it would go all the way down, so district level, site level, program level, down to student level. And we are in the beginning initial work behind that, led by our Assistant Superintendent, Jackie Perez. And you'll also see ensuring the clean and accurate student data. The more we immerse ourselves in it, the more we know that data has to be very clean and accurate in order to get clean and accurate data out. So it's something that we're looking at as part of the creation of the internal dashboard. And then the idea that our school goals and success are very much linked to the success indicators, and the actions and services that are impacting student learning are impacting through the 12 success indicators as well.
Can you please take a question from Dr. Farouk?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So my question is probably more for Dr. Yoho. You know, I know you mentioned how this process takes time and that we need to look at the trends and the broader context. And, you know, if I could buy stock in RUSD, I would certainly buy it. I have confidence in the team and the direction and the plan that we're doing to move things forward. However, you know, we don't want to be in a situation where several years pass and we find out for whatever reason that things did not end up playing out the way that we would like outcome-wise. And obviously the cost for students generationally to go through any number of years, no matter how short of time frame it is, that has an impact on people's lives. What kinds of indicators, whether they're outside the context of this data, I'm just saying in general, as board members, can we be ascertaining to determine like what kinds of warning signs or flags that we should be reassessing our strategy and plan throughout that process in the interim?
Oh, great question, thank you. I'm going to go both. On the indicator, you'll see subgroups too. So when you're setting targets, you can set those targets. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to answer it both ways. The things that are in the information that's in the indicator and that's not in the indicator. The information that you can gather internally to ascertain how well your students are doing that's not part of the indicator could be formative assessments, for example. You could have both for English learners as well as the standards in English language arts, mathematics, even starting pretty soon you could do the science. You could have internal assessments that will actually tell you if they're built correctly so that they're measuring the same content at the same rigor level and in the same way, methodology. You can actually have those created. You can create them, and sometimes you can even purchase them, but you can get really fast information back. Particularly like in elementary school where their youngsters are learning to read, which one of your beautiful targets is reading and numeracy. So you can actually gather data with formative assessments really quickly. You can even use the Smarter Balanced system. Is much more comprehensive than just the summative test. They actually have something called Interim Test. There's a test that's very, very similar to the big comprehensive test, the summative test, but they also have these little tests called blocks. And what's beautiful about those is if the block actually measures the same content that a teacher has been teaching, and they can actually take their students to the computer lab, and they can actually take that small test, and it's at the right rigor level, and they can see how they're doing, progressing. Also, they have another element called where teachers can actually just view questions. There's another document there's something called achievement level descriptors in English and math. And what the achievement level descriptors do is it actually says this is what students should be able to know and be able to do. And so it actually will break it down by something called threshold achievement level descriptors, where it actually says the typical child that's at grade level, level 3, they can do these things. And so when you're measuring internally, you can actually see whether or not students are progressing now, and you don't have to wait 2 or 3 years. We have found, when I say we, the districts I've had an opportunity to be with, they have discovered that oftentimes teachers are teaching the standards, and they are. If you ask them, or if you watch them, they're teaching the standards, but it's not at the right rigor level. And so a lot of times when they look at these threshold descriptors, achievement level descriptors, they go, oh, we got to step it up a little bit. We have to do more problem solving or more critical thinking. So there are things like that you can do instructionally. It's critical to remember, it's not about test scores. It's not even really about the dashboard. It's all about learning. It's teaching and learning. Because when the kids learn, there's effective teaching and learning going on, then all these indicators are just going to go up. And so you can do that with visits to classrooms, and there's a lot of ways you can monitor what's happening and work with teachers. Teachers often work in grade level teams to create common formative assessments. There's just a number of things. When it comes inside the dashboard, when you get your dashboard in November, you can actually look at subgroups. And so you can set subgroup targets. You can say this group, overall, For example, maybe your graduation rate was a really high, nice graduation rate, but you might have a subgroup that you're going, oh my goodness gracious, we maybe could do something with this subgroup. So you could monitor how well the kids are doing right away. You can actually monitor them. Let's say it's A through G. Well, counselors can actually look at how well students are doing A through G. In one of the districts nearby, what they did is they went through every single seniors to see how well they were progressing toward A through G, fulfilling all of their A through G requirements. Well, they discovered 48 kids needed to take fine arts courses. So the counselors knew that right away, and they were able to modify that kids' schedules, at least most of them, and you'll have more kids. So there's things you can do to monitor that will actually influence the achievement right away, actually.
Thank you, Dr. Yoho.
I'd like to interject one thing.
Sure.
Because I appreciate all of the ideas, and I want to make note that we actually do break down our data on what we monitor with the LCAP by student groups, and we have done that and have been commended for that before other districts. And it allows us to really see that. And with respect to the blocks for the assessment pieces, I think that is significant because that was one of the barriers to the interims, was it wasn't small enough to be able to identify the actual mastery that we were looking for or where it connected. And so most of the things he's mentioned are part of our instructional direction, and we would look forward to sharing more of that with you in the future if you're interested. I will also make one recommendation as far as being able to share each of the success indicators with the board at different board meetings if there is interest for that. So I'd like to hear that maybe at the end.
Thank you. We have a question from our student board member.
My question is also, Dr. Yoho, my question might also be for you. So as someone who has taken the SBAC last year, and while we're on the subject of these different testing standards, in your experience, how do you think that schools should go about recalibrating curriculum so that there's more applied content and beyond student just regurgitating formulas?
That's going to be again, I honestly believe with all my heart it's all about teaching and learning. It's not about test scores. It's all about teaching and learning. And so some of the things that your school district's already doing, your district already went through an adoption, part of an adoption last year, and it's going to be scheduled to do it again in the near future. See, that's beautiful, because what teachers are doing right now is they're teaching the very best they can with old material across the entire state. It's not just here. So when you had an adoption, and so now you have teachers with new material, and you have some teachers with old, because adoptions take years. So as the instruction is going to come up bigger level, the complexity, as teachers are actually have more resources to be able to do it with. So basically, when they get new textbooks and other online sources, it will help an awful lot.
I'm going to add to the key factor for us in Riverside truly is the collaboration, in that we're developing the curriculum, not in our classrooms necessarily, but that we're ensuring that we have mastery at grade level through that collaborative group. And when we don't, we know it because of the interims that we're working on in our collaborative teams, and then the actions that we provide following that, either benchmark in the classroom or extra support. So very clear things that we need to attend to that we are in process of doing. So
Okay, thank you. Dr. Farouk?
Yes, thank you. One other question. So I know that we've made comment, like with the API, there was a particular score, and that's how the public would compare schools and so forth. And I understand that obviously the state has gone in this broader direction in terms of assessing these things. But my question is do we have a sense of how the public is consuming this? Because I understand that how it's intended, our relationship between RUSD and the state of California in terms of continuous improvement and all that, I understand that. But what kind of way is the public still consuming this by and large? Because that still matters as well to us.
Yeah, great question. What's going to happen is When it comes out in November, the state will have a number of ways of broadcasting that information. It's hard to judge. What will particularly happen is, typically what's happened historically is that when there's accountability has some kind of anchor to it, some type of target, like with the federal government requiring through ESSA for us to have a state target. Well, those state targets were just set in July. So people are just now starting. You're actually one of the school districts that actually knows those targets even exist. So it takes a little bit of time. In November, when the dashboard comes out, more districts will have lessons and people will get to know what it's like. And particularly when the 5% of the lowest performing schools are identified by the state for assistance or even intensive intervention, that will again be another avenue for people to go, oh my. So it's going to take time. It's not going to, I bet you a year from now, I guarantee you a lot of people are going to know about it. Realtors will start using it just like they did with the API. They'll say, this school's got this district's really great. You're going to want to live there. You know, they're going to do all that, but it takes a little bit of time. But I guarantee you in the next 6 months, it's going to pick up a lot because it's the starting point in November. So by next June, almost everybody knows, especially because it's used with the LCAP process. This information is part, and the things that make up the indicators and your success indicators, all of that's in your LCAP. And all of that, as you go around and you're working with your different groups internally, you're going to be telling them about this. And so more and more people will get to know. It just takes a little bit of time.
And I think the way we put it out intentionally is significant. You notice our principals are here tonight to support where we are and also think about how we're building to continue to improve across the district. But they're the best friends of our communities, right? Of course. And so I think that intentional getting out in front is also key for us as it does pick up some steam.
Thank you. I think, is Ryan up next? Is
Yes,
Dr.
so
Lewis
I'd like
coming
to
up
introduce
next?
Dr. Lewis. He's going to be telling us the story about English learners in our district. And, oh, you're here and ready. Great.
Good evening. It is a little loud. Vice President Locke Dawson, Dr. Hanson, members of the board. We come to talk, sounds really loud. Our team has been here several times in the last few months talking about English learners and what we are doing and how we are building and the story behind the work we know we have to do, and we know the importance of that work. So we thought we would take a different angle tonight. Our team met to try to figure out how to best explain the journey that you heard Dr. Yoho talk about and the journey of data. So we're going to take a different approach. You saw the 5x5 grid that we spoke to earlier with English learners, very similar, that will be coming out. But with English learners, the rules are changing, and we are in the process of that right now, going between CELT to LPAC. So what we thought it would be best to do is first talk about where we are. We're looking at current progression on CELT with our target, and you heard about that earlier. And then talking about, you also heard about ELPI and the difference. And the major difference here is we are adding our students who have RFEP'd or reclassified and making sure we monitor them and have a success for a year. So you would notice with reclassification plus EL proficiency growing up at a CELT level, the difference of what the data would look like with the new progress indicator. What does that mean? So what we thought we would do is approach it from the story of a cohort of students. Students that entered at kindergarten, where were they on their way to middle school? So we know we want to reclassify as many students as possible before they enter middle school. So we start looking at an incoming class. Cohort of about 2,000 students in 6th grade. Of the 2,000, 681 is the number we're going to look at for English learners. And you can see about 5% come in kinder, and they immediately are what we call IFEP'd, so they're not considered English learners. We don't have anybody RFEP'd in kinder, because they would be IFEP'd if they were. We have about 62% English only, and about 33% English learners. So what that represents, about 97% of our students coming in at kinder are born in the United States. About 3% are newcomers, and you can see as it walks across. About 95% identify Spanish, and about 77% of our students are low income, and about 9% of them are from special education.
So, Dr. Lewis, again, just because I think it's very important to restate this, 97% of our English language learners in 6th grade, which means they haven't been reclassified?
No, this is enrollment in kindergarten.
Oh,
So we're
okay.
starting at kinder, we're going to end up at 6th.
Okay.
So 97% of our kinder students who are English learners are born in the United States. Because we've talked about the gap with newcomers. Only about 3% of our kinder students are newcomers. Of the English learners in kindergarten, about 77% of them are identified as low-income students. So it's just identifying that cohort entering kindergarten.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So what we now do when in kindergarten, they have to measure their English proficiency. And this is kindergarten data in light blue. 3rd grade is the middle, darker blue, and the far right, the dark blue is 6th grade. So I'm going to walk you through this. So starting in kindergarten, we're going to identify the light blue. So 43% of those kindergarten students, when they entered, were CELT 1, or beginning level. 29% were CELT 2, or early intermediate. 29% were CELT 3, and none of them were CELT 4 or 5 in kindergarten, because if they are, then they're IFEPT in kindergarten. So we follow that cohort to now 3rd grade, and now we're in the darker blue in the middle. 8% of the 43% that there were in kindergarten, 8% are still at CELT 1. If you look at early intermediate, 13% are CELT 2. If you notice, CELT 3 has increased because we're moving the CELT 1 and 2 towards CELT 3. 34% are at CELT 3. 5% are at CELT 4 or 5. And 40% of them by 3rd grade are reclassified. So of the group that came in kinder, by the time they're in 3rd grade, we reclassify 40% of that incoming class. So let's fast forward to 6th grade, the same cohort. In 6th grade, 4% are CELT 1, 4% are CELT 2, 17% are CELT 3, 9% are CELT 4 or 5, and 66% have reclassified. So when we talk about that cohort of students who come in kinder, and where do they finish in 6th grade, right now, currently, our elementary schools are reclassifying 66% of that incoming class. If you notice the 4 and 5, you may be wondering, why is the 9% not reclassified? It has to do with reclassification criteria. I'll talk about in a second. So what does that mean for the story? So now we look at them, they leave 6th grade, now they're going to 7th. Of the students, the 34% who have not been reclassified, 35% of them meet one or more of the reclassification criteria, but they don't meet the whole thing. And that's the criteria that we have established. 24% of them do not meet any of the criteria, and 41% of that same cohort are identified in special education. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, this is of the 40% in, let's see, no, sorry. Yeah, 40, it would be like 34%. Those are the ones that have not been reclassified, that are still English language learners, correct?
That is correct.
So of that 34%, 35% of that 34%,
Correct.
okay, are still not moving on.
They meet one
They meet
criteria,
one.
but they don't meet all the criteria.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So what that means with data, and this is why it's going to change when we start looking at ELPI and reporting the data. So if you look at this 6th grade class, all students, all 2,000 plus students, 51% of them were proficient in ELA. Mathematics is on the right, but I'll just walk you through ELA first. When you look at the 6th grade cohort, 38% of those students, that cohort of English learners that started in kindergarten, 38% of them are proficient in ELA. The RFEP students is 53%. If you look at just the number of students that are remaining English learners by 6th grade, it's about 200 students, 5% of them are proficient in ELA. So why this is important? Many times in our EL story, we continue to look at our ELs, and if they've been reclassified, we consider them successful, we don't report them in our EL story. The important part is when you put that EL story together, who entered kindergarten as an English learner? They are now going to be called in the new system an EVER EL. They started as an English learner, and even though they're reclassified, they still came in as an English learner, and they are being successful. If you look at the academic trends of students who are RFEP, you'll notice that the RFEP students are at 53% proficient or advanced in ELA. So we are having a lot of success with our English learners, and our RFEP students are academically sometimes outperforming other subgroups. Mathematics is on the right, and you'll look at the same trend. So why we felt that was important was just to tell that story of a cohort of students coming into kinder and how they walk through. The last piece, I believe we were here in late June, talking about the instructional plan that we were working on with our team and how we're training teachers. So we thought we'd update you since then what we've done. So we had over 400 students trained over the summer as course leads or course mentors, working on our Blue Book, working on integrated ELD into content areas. We have also gone through and looked at our success indicators, and we're working through shared leadership with our leadership teams on meeting the needs of our English learners. Additionally, we're using instructional rounds at 19 of our schools where we are partnering schools together to walk and look at classrooms and look at how students are doing and learn together as part of that shared leadership, and that will be going on this year as well.
So Dr. Lewis, under that bullet of developed action plans or strategies for English learners aligned to the success indicators, is that to sort of bridge that disconnect between the reclassification and the SBAC scores? Because it sounds like even though they may not, the CELT scores aren't kind of measuring the same thing as the ELA on the SBAC, right? So
I'll talk about reclassification in a second. What we're looking here is just core program. We're looking at instruction in the classroom and how our teachers are planning to meet the instructional need. The reclassification criteria, we will get an update in a slide or two ahead. Thank you. So progress monitoring and reclassification. We are working, all of our sites are going to be working with our English learners between now and December to retake the CELT test and see if they meet their reclassification criteria prior to moving to the LPAC. We have until December 2017 to do that. So our instructional service team with all of our EL contacts and site principals, they are working, going through identifying students that need to take the CELT now before we change to LPAC. As well, we're looking at data for reclassification students and making sure we are monitoring. That's called elevation. It is piloted last year. We are rolling it out district-wide this year, and it is real-time data tracking and what we're doing with students. When we get to next steps, this is where we talk about reclassification criteria. We are reevaluating across the board what we're doing with reclassification. All good ideas and all good programs at some time need to be reevaluated. So we're looking at, as we're changing to LPAC, does our reclassification process match what the state is setting up with LPAC? So we have a team currently reviewing that. So as we go into the new accountability system, we hope to align across the board for all subgroups as well. So we're partnering across divisions. And the last part, we're talking about the integrated and designated ELD support, TK-12, preschool 12. How are we supporting our English learners, not only in ELD class, but also as a transition between core program. And that is a brief update on where we are currently with English learners.
Dr. Farouk has a question for you.
So on the reclassification criteria, we can develop that in a vacuum. I know the state has recommendations, but that's our discretion to do that?
Currently, we can add district, like we talk about local measures. We have the state criterion, but districts do have the opportunity that if they see necessary for additional, we can add that. Correct.
And what's the time frame for that evaluation that you mentioned in the next steps, the first bullet point?
We will be aligning that to LPAC. So we have until now to December. LPAC will be starting in January, and we will do everything in our power to have that system aligned by then. Thank you.
I have a question. For the incoming kindergartners who are classified as English learners, can we disaggregate the data to determine who of those have been in a pre-K or a TK? Do we know that at all? Like, is that?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to look into that.
I just wonder if, we can tease that out, if that's a potential strategy for, you're talking about the improvements, and if TK and pre-K has perhaps positioned some of those kids to move on, if there's a correlation between that.
I'm sure we have our data for TK and the students enrolled in preschool, but other than that, outside of our boundaries, I'm sure we could do some surveying or finding out coming in where our students are coming from. We have the internal side, but going bigger, we could work on.
Okay.
Just to clarify, Ms. Lockdawson, if I go back to Mrs. Carmody, so the 71% of our kids that met the end of the year, Dibbles reading by third grade, how many of that 71% was with us since TK, kindergarten, stair step up to third? And we have that data.
We will work on that
in our system.
Just trying to tease out whether there's a correlation between whether they attended TK, pre-K, and their success later on by third grade. And also the English language learners as well, if they are still coming into kindergarten as an English language learner, and they had TK or pre-K, are they being reclassified sooner? Are they performing better later on, third and sixth grade? That's what I would, it's just a way to sort of look and see if there are other things we can be doing. I'm going to get to you in a moment, Dr. Hanson. I do have a question. Something that has always intrigued me, and I'm not sure who in the team can answer this, but something that's always intrigued me about assessments is that we are always looking at continuous improvement, right? That's always your measure is you want to see year over year improvement as things. Well, I've always questioned that as a statistically how but I'm just curious if someone could speak to, there is a natural limit on how much you can improve from year to year. So you start to pick your low-hanging fruit, you're moving forward, there's going to be less improvement over time. So your time horizon sort of is going to crimp your ability to improve. So I'm just wondering, how does the state handle that? Do you understand my question? It's going to be more and more difficult to attain your improvement standard.
Yep, it sure will. On that 5x5, let's say it's English language arts on Smarter Balance, you're absolutely right. The state is very much aware. Thanks. The state is very much aware that getting to the green cells or the blue is really challenging. If you're in the blue area or even the high green, it's very difficult to stay there. That's why the state actually created a column that says maintain, just to maintain. So they actually realize there is a limit on how far you can go up. And so there's a little bit of, if you're really, really high, there's a regression toward the mean, so you will slide down, and they know you will. And that's why there's several cells that are blue, several cells that are in the green, because the state realizes that you're going to fluctuate, you're going to be going up and down. And if you're really, really high, you're still okay if you slip down a little bit, because it's incredibly difficult. It's like getting athletes. If you have a really, really great year at the plate in baseball, well, maybe next year you're not hitting 315, maybe you're hitting 310. You went down a little bit, but you're still a good hitter. So the state realizes that, and that's why they made their 5x5s the way they did.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? And I haven't gotten any cards, so I don't think we've got any questions from the audience. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hanson, who's going to sum up. He has some comments he wants to make.
Thank you, Ms. Lockdawson. I want to thank staff for their hard work, and Dr. Yoho, thank you for your expertise, and for all the administrators in the audience. Very grateful that you're here this evening. I have talked to our President Lee and members of the board, and I'm going to read this statement if I can. As we move forward to look at continuing to grow and close the gaps and really help our kids the very best, I want to link back to last March. Last March, Harvard University political scientist Dr. Robert Putnam shared his groundbreaking research with local education, business, and civic leaders here in Riverside. And his research focuses on the impact of growing inequality gap on children and solutions on how to try to move the needle in the right direction. Putnam's research states that when we think about our marginalized youth, the ones on the lower end of the opportunity totem pole, if you will, it's not just schools or parents or churches that are going to make a major change in the lives of the American youth. It's all of us. All of them must come together collectively. And there isn't a magical solution, Dr. Putnam says. The main advantage of focusing on the whole community is that the potential to address the problem is greater when we can collaborate and work together across local departments and agencies. Riverside Unified School District, as you saw this evening and heard, is the 15th largest school district in the state of California, serving over 42,000 students in 50 schools here in Riverside. Our diverse student population includes a student body that is 62% Hispanic or Latino, 23% white, and 7% African American. However, while the opportunity gap does include race as a factor, it's not the only factor. 61% of our students come from low-income households, and 17% of them are English learners, with, as you saw this just recently from Dr. Lewis, 11% of them are redesignated English learners. And historically, achievement data for students living in poverty, as well as our Latino and African American students, is significantly lower in this district than other student groups, not only here in RUSD, but also in the state and throughout the nation. And as educators, it's absolutely our duty to recognize and address any gaps that represent disparities among our children. And addressing these gaps is the first and most significant step towards reaching equality and opening access and opportunity for all students. It is our educational imperative that demands that we, here in RUSD, take action to ensure that all students are provided opportunities for excellence. And that is why this evening I am pleased as superintendent to announce that we are going to put together an equity task force with the main objective of defining the word equality at its most basic level and building a framework to address issues of inequality and disparity, specifically here within Riverside Unified School District. We will look at socioeconomic status, we will look at race, we will look at gender, we will look at sexual orientation and other factors and develop a clear, action-oriented plan for addressing those gaps I talked about earlier. All of this work will be framed around our 12 indicators for success, our guiding principles for the work that we do here in the district. And going back to Putnam's research, I want to make sure that we engage our community to the fullest extent possible. We will need our higher education partners, our civic leaders, our community special interest groups, our community business partners, our clergy and other medical professionals, and the list goes on, to be partners of this initiative and champions of the work we will embark upon. I've asked the talented team, led by Assistant Superintendent Dr. Jackie Perez and also Dr. Ryan Lewis, to lead this task force, along with a host of other RUSD leaders, and to provide the Board of Education a mid-year report in February 2018 and a full report in June of 2018 with plan for implementation by the start of 2018-19 school year. And I just want to again confirm that RUSD is absolutely dedicated to supporting all students and closing the opportunity gap along with the achievement gap. And as you see with the creation of this important equity task force, we are serious about this work. No student should be left behind or left to fight or be left to fight for good education simply because they're born under circumstances different than others. We believe that all children should get a fair shot at a good education. And here in Riverside, we hope to make that a reality for each and every student, as well as each and every employee every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen. I think I can speak for the whole board when I say we all believe very strongly in this task force. I think it's maybe a feeling of about time for some of it, because I don't think this is tolerable for anybody. I don't think anybody wants to see or believe that any one of our children is incapable of learning because of their situation. So I think we're all about trying to make our kids successful here and our families and our community as well. So I thank you a lot as a mom and a community member too. All right, anybody else have anything they want to say? No? Okay, terrific. So we are moving on in our agenda. Next up is our consent items, and these are really routine items that we vote on in a block unless somebody wants to pull something out. And does anybody?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, so I need to ask our board to please vote. All right, that motion carries. Our next item is we are moving into a public hearing. And this is sort of a two-part thing. We have a public hearing and then we're going to have an action item on it, and this is on our instructional materials. So first up, we're going to have the public hearing on something we need to do every year, and this is a resolution on our pupil textbook and instructional materials compliance for fiscal year 17-18. And at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. And any members of the public who wish to address the board concerning the public hearing, please complete a request to speak in the back. I haven't received any cards, I don't think. And bring it up, and otherwise we will listen to Dr. Lewis give us share with us a brief presentation. Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
As a condition of the receipt of instructional materials for funding, California Ed Code Section 60119 requires school district governing boards to hold an annual public hearing and make a determination regarding the sufficiency of instructional materials to ensure each pupil has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials within 2 months of the start of the school year in mathematics, science, history, social science, foreign language, English language arts, and ELD, English language development.
Okay, any comments from anyone? No? Nobody from the public? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Dr. Lewis, I think you're next up. We're moving into our action.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to ask the board to take action on the next agenda item, which is to approve a resolution 2017-18-12, pupil textbook and instructional materials compliance for fiscal year 2017-2018, which indicates we are in compliance and have sufficient textbooks for this academic year.
Dr. Farouk?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, Mrs. Alabi. Cruz, please vote. All right, that motion carries. Thank you. Okay. So the next portion of our meeting tonight, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about our professional growth systems, and I think we're very eager to hear how things are going over in the facility you've been placed in, at least temporarily. Mr. Garcia is going to give us a brief update on our PGS.
Yes, thank you, Vice President Locke Dawson, Dr. Hansen, and members of the board. So tonight, we are going to provide you with a couple of different ways to give you an update. Since I last gave you an update several months ago, this is on the work of the staff from the PGS division in the last several months. What we're going to do first is there's a video that we'd like to show you. It's a 3-minute video, just giving you a peek of the system here in RUSD. And then I'm going to come back up and introduce a couple of people who will be providing you with an update based on the PowerPoint that's been prepared for you.
Do you have all your members of your PGS team here tonight?
Yeah, yes, so there are several of them here, and a couple of them will be presenting, and I'll be introducing them after the video.
If you're out there, can you wave? All right.
Yeah. Matter of fact, would you
Stand
please,
up.
if you're here from the PGS division, would you please stand, be acknowledged?
There we go. Thank you.
So if we can show the video now. Yeah.
Professional growth systems is a way in which we are going to be supporting our teachers. Professional growth systems is a way in which we are going to be supporting our teachers.
And we are working with our interns, our induction candidates, and anyone who is new to Riverside Unified.
In the past, when I've gone to a new school, it's been, here's your class, here are your keys, have a nice time.
Our support teachers will be in there helping the teachers.
Professional growth systems is a way in which we are going to be supporting our teachers.
And we are working with our interns, our induction candidates, and anyone who is new to Riverside Unified.
In the past, when I've gone to a new school, it's been, here's your class, here are your keys, have a nice time.
Our support teachers will be in there helping the teachers with the strategies. How are they teaching that content?
The most important thing that happens in a school day happens in the classroom.
We're going to be working with them all year long. The frequency of our meetings with them is going to vary.
Ms. Hicken, my coach who comes in regularly, she comes in and asks me, do you need any support? Do you need me to test some of your kids?
They've given them strategies that then they've got to go back and see those strategies implemented.
Some might need support in classroom management strategies, others might need support in questioning and engagement strategies, some might need help with the plan.
We send me resources all the time on questioning techniques and all kinds of stuff like that. It's a collaborative process. It's very personalized based on our teacher's needs.
On one hand, you don't want to overwhelm the teacher, but at the same time, you have to throw that life vest out.
If I'm struggling, if I feel like I'm sinking, she will come in right away and make sure I get the support I need.
To empower every teacher that's coming to our USD to develop their style.
And we have to be so careful to stand back and to allow them that growth.
And teaching is a complex profession. It's an art and it's a science.
You know, I think the art of teaching is balancing that rare act of balancing connection and content.
So we don't want clones of our support teachers.
It's not about teaching how to teach, it's more about getting acclimated to the new district.
This is something that was modeled after the work of Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland.
And they have years of support. They've been doing this for 15, 16 years now. And they have evidence-based research that will demonstrate how a new teacher with this type of support can have the same impact and student achievement as a veteran teacher.
If I have a question about anything business related or even, okay, back to school night coming, what do I need to prep for that?
We're investing a lot in our teachers, and so we need to make sure that we provide the support necessary for them to be successful.
There's a reason we're in teaching. Our why is our kids, and we all belong to that.
It's why we exist as an institution, and it's what we have to contribute the most to when it comes to the broader society.
When I got hired for this year, I was like, okay, I'm gonna need all the support I can get. It's my first year doing any of this. So yeah, it's been awesome.
If I ever say, rate this, 0 to 5, this would be a 5 experience for me.
I feel supported on all ends that I can do this.
I want to, first of all, thank Robert Bledsoe and his team for doing an amazing job at just capturing the spirit, the excitement of this initiative that, as we all know, has been and continues to be just this great collaborative between our RCTA, Teachers Union, our district. Our 8 support teachers have been doing just an amazing job under the leadership of Haley Calhoun and Mariana Robles. Barb Leibold and Hans, preparing them as in terms of the induction capacity that our support teachers need to just be able to support all of the teachers that we're supporting this year. To give you some more details about that, I've invited our 2 lead support teachers to walk you through this PowerPoint and give you some testimonial as to the work that they've been doing. And so I'm going to ask Dave Watring and Ann Camacho, our 2 lead support teachers, to come on up and do that for you.
Good evening, Dr. Hansen and members of the board. After 2 years of planning and designing, the PGS team began its work on August 14th. During the 2 weeks prior to the start of the school year, we engaged in professional development designed to build a sense of team, align our work to the guide for instructional design, familiarize us with the tools and processes we were using in our work with our new teachers, and extending our understanding of RUSD schools and their surrounding communities. To that end, support teachers went on a bus tour arranged by Marta Nelson from Transportation and narrated by Haley Calhoun. And we went to all 38 school sites that we're servicing this year, and we're able to drive around the communities and see where it is we are going to be serving new teachers this year. Another highlight was a new teacher orientation on August 22nd. At this event, support teachers were introduced to and had the opportunity to work with their participating teachers. Lynn Carmenday shared a few words in a video by Michael Jr. entitled, Know Your Why. Tim Martin shared about the unique collaboration between district and Riverside City Teachers Association. Currently, the 8 support teachers are serving 89 teachers, 49 of whom are new to the profession, and 40 of whom are experienced teachers new to Riverside Unified School District. The 89 teachers we serve represent 38 school sites, spanning all levels from pre-K to adult education.
Good evening, Dr. Hansen and esteemed board members. What you're looking at there are the faces of who this PGS Pioneer journey is going to affect this year. As we met our PTs, we realized that there are a few key points that we wanted to remember as we moved forward. As support teachers, we have rosters, not caseloads. We have evidence, not paperwork. We have tools, not forms. And we are all still teachers. In these past 6 weeks, I have watched all of us mourn the loss of preparing our own classrooms for the start of a new year, while simultaneously helping new teachers set up their classrooms, borders and all. I've watched us stretch to understand a 60-plus page Danielson rubric and use our calibration tools only to drop them in a flash when a new school had to be evacuated for a fire. I am constantly amazed by my fellow coaches, their fluency and their knowledge of instructional practice, their commitment to learning the framework, their dedication to helping new teachers find their footing has been inspiring. And though there have been a few tears, there's been more laughter and camaraderie as I've watched how we have evolved in only a few short months, moving from supporting and teaching students to supporting and teaching teachers. So, a recap on the last 6 weeks. What have we been doing? We have met weekly with our PTs, our participating teachers, face-to-face, as well as through emails, many long phone calls, and texts. We've met with our site administrators, and we can easily pick them out in a crowd. We are grateful for the support of Haley Calhoun in her work as our principal liaison as we learn the ropes from another perspective. We are grateful for her grace. We have completed a full cycle of informal observations for 89 teachers. We are now starting our first of 3 cycles for our formal observations. And like the teachers we support, we have continued to have our own PLC on Wednesday afternoons. We also have a division team meeting on the last Wednesday of every month, led by our fearless leader, Antonio Garcia. We have ongoing induction training with Barb Leibelt and Hans Caulfield, and have continued our valuable framework training with Jory, our Danielson consultant, and of course, endless patience from Mariana Robles to help strengthen our skills. There are lots of logistics and calendars to support. I have been so impressed with the team doing a wonderful job figuring that out. Our motto has become meet them where they're at, support them moving forward. Great teaching comes from reflection put into action. And so our next steps. As I said, we are going to conduct 3 formal observation cycles this year, and we are already in the start of our first. The district is completing its 4th Danielson training cohort this week, as it covers an in-depth look at the 4 domains and the 22 subdomains of the Danielson framework, which consist of planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities. These have been cross-referenced with the California state standards, and the focus is on pedagogical language, observation, and coaching skills. And so finally, we have met twice now with our principal pair review panel, and our first midterm panel is coming up on December 5th. Our second will be on March 6th, and the implementation team will continue to work to consider changes as PGS evolves. Ultimately, it's been groundbreaking work, this forging of a new path, and we are grateful to be pioneers on this journey. I think it says questions next.
Yes. Thank you. So we do have a number of questions and comments. Mrs. Alavi.
Thank you. I was just curious whether or not things change with your approach to veteran teachers versus new teachers, or whether when you go into the classroom, it is the same for everybody and it just is what it is.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I'm a veteran teacher myself. So this is my 29th year in education. So it's been a great way to look at teaching from multiple perspectives, from that of a brand new teacher. And that's a different perspective than someone that brings experience to the table. So you do have to deal with them. It's a case by case. We personalize our support to those teachers to meet them where they're at, like Ann said, and to provide the support they need to move them forward in their practice so that there's a great teacher in front of every classroom in our district. That's our goal.
Great.
And in terms of veteran teachers and new teachers, what we are finding is that it really is a personalized learning experience, because veteran teachers sometimes have similar needs to new teachers as they move into a district, and as education continues to move forward with strategies and the changes can be difficult. And so there's been much support given across the board with our 89 teachers, not just a heavier support with induction, which is maybe what we first thought, but the spread is fairly even.
Good. All right, Dr. Farouk.
Thank you. I want to commend Antonio Garcia, the entire collective team. It's been an extraordinary initiative to take this on, and fundamentally this cuts to the heart of really impacting our culture of excellence, district-wide with our students. So I think the value of this is very important. But my question actually is, or suggestions slightly, is for Ms. Ibarra. Is this being incorporated in our recruitment for teachers? And if so, what kind of feedback are you getting in terms of how important this is for recruitment? But I want to emphasize, obviously, the overall value is very significant. I'm just curious about this specific thing also.
Yes. This will be our first year where it has been a component that we can say is up and running. Last year in spring, we did use it as a recruitment tool in speaking of it as what it's going to be. So it did make a difference, but I don't think anyone really understood, well, what is it? And so now even with that video, as I was watching it, one of the things I thought is, well, that's something we can have streaming at our fair, at our activities that we do to be able to do that recruitment. And we will, as we look at that, most likely be incorporating and having different people attend with us to speak to what PGS looks like. So I don't know if that answered it.
I'm sorry, if I can add just one other thing to what Ms. Ibarra just mentioned. I've also had the opportunity to meet with the deans of UCR Graduate School of Education and Cal Baptist School of Education, and also had an opportunity to address the student teachers at UC Riverside through the alumni mentor network that they have. That's actually coordinated by the president of the Alumni Association, Ken Oller, and was able to talk about the PGS and what we're doing to support teachers and have them consider that component of teacher support in addition to other factors that they may be looking at, such as salary and benefits and other things like that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Onward. Welcome, Mr. Hunt. Better late than never. We're happy to have you. Next item of business is that we've got another update on our STEM lottery. And Dr. Lewis, you're back. Hello. So, Dr. Lewis, would you like to talk to us about the neighborhood lottery?
Yes, I would. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. So when we were here last time, we talked about the STEM lottery. We have moved forward. We're beginning the work, working with the staff at STEM. But additionally, we were asked to look at a neighborhood lottery and what that would look like. So we have partnered with Cooperative Strategies, gone back to look at all the data was included, and we're here with a recommendation this evening if it meets what the desire is. And I'll walk forward with what that is. So the first thing we looked at is within a proposal for a neighborhood lottery. Let me start here and then I'll go backwards. So what we looked at first is the complete boundary. So if you notice where the white box is lettering STEM, that is where Riverside STEM Academy is located. So we looked at the large boundary that you'll see that stretches all the way to your left, past the 215. That was the original Hyatt boundary. What we would propose is the shaded area of the dark pink, light red, to be the proposed new area for the 4 seats that we talked about for the neighborhood lottery. What that area includes would be approximately 420 homes. In that area, 103 students are attending Riverside Unified School District. And currently in that area, we have 12 students that are participating in STEM currently. So the proposal would be this would be our area to identify the 4 seats that we spoke of at our last meeting for the neighborhood lottery for STEM.
And that would be in the red, is what the 420 homes is included in that red.
Correct.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Lewis? Mrs. Alavi?
So let me understand how this would work. Since we already have 12 students, we wouldn't have to enact anything. It's already enacted. Correct?
The 12 students that are there have already currently participated. It would be for that incoming class of 5th graders.
Right. So if by nature of the lottery, more than 4 get in automatically, then you don't need to add 4. You've already accomplished 4. Is that what I'm understanding?
Mr. Walker.
If I may, the design that was approved by the board is that 4 of each lottery year would be from the area of the STEM Academy. So the proposal is that out of the upcoming STEM Academy lottery, the 4 spots would be identified in that area that Dr. Ryan Lewis has identified in red.
Okay.
For the 5th grade incoming class.
So
I'm sure
4 in addition
this
to
will
the
be
12.
worked out as we try it this year. But your original idea is to hold the lotteries by high school. So this would be within the North High School area.
No, this is separate and apart, 4 spots identified for just the attendance area identified in red on the map.
Okay, apart from the
Apart from the.
North High School.
Think along the lines of the 10 that are put aside for UCR and the 10 that are put aside for external inter-district transfers. We have 6 now. So 6 inter-district and 4 from this area. If we don't get 4 from that area, they go back into the inter-district. That was the direction of the board.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hunt, did you have a comment? I saw your name was up.
Just want to be sure that, so if I move into this area, I buy a home in this area, and I want my child to go to STEM, that can count. The fact that I live in this attendance area, I bypass the lottery, is that correct?
No, you get 4 spots.
There are the 4 seats that we will hold for that 5th grade lottery just for this attendance area.
Okay, all right, that's good.
Okay. Anybody, any other comments? All right, good work. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Eager to see how that goes. All righty. So we come to the end of our board meeting tonight, and we've got board member comments. So I will start with Dr. Farouk.
Thank you. It's great to see all the principals here, and good work on all the work from the staff as well. Thank you.
Is that it? That's your only comment tonight? I see. Okay. Michelle Bubos, would you like to have anything to say?
So I'm actually enjoying study sessions more out of the board meetings I've come to.
So do we.
I really enjoy seeing the data and whatnot. For me, tonight, I took the SBAC last year, so every time I see those figures popping up on the screen, I just get flashbacks to taking that SBAC. And I remembered, and I think I told Dr. Hansen, I distinctly remembered taking the math section, and it was something totally different than what I expected, and it was so analytical, and it was more applied mathematics, and it was asking me, I think, to like measure a man falling off a cliff or something like that, and it was such applied mathematics, and they weren't formulas that I had to regurgitate or anything like that. So I'd love to see curriculums and teaching styles adapting to more of that applied things so that students like me and my friends don't come out of the test saying, well, what was that? We have no idea what we just came out of. And I also hope that, seeing all this data is really interesting, seeing, our graduation rates and whatnot, but seeing a 90% or 95% graduation rate, well, what about those other 5%? What's happening with those other 5%? Why aren't they meeting our standards? So I really hope that we could take more time to analyze those other numbers too. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to hear from you. Mrs. Alavi?
Good points, Michelle. The first topic I wanted to bring to everyone's attention was actually brought to me by another teacher from another district, which has an ethnic studies class that is A to G approved. I know we have an ethnic studies class which is not A to G approved, and I would like to look into that and follow that through. And next, some of you might be aware that the STEM school was doing this think tank. It's this new hybrid social studies, English language, engineering, composite class, which is kind of interesting. And as part of that class, they're taking the students and they're going to elementary schools and teaching the elementary school students science. And I was forwarded this nice letter that's addressed to the STEM students who came from the STEM high school to Harrison. And it says, wow, your students exceeded our expectations. They were prepared, knowledgeable, engaging, entertaining, and just the right amount of weird. The expressions on the faces of my students were that of excitement, eagerness, and joy as they were learning. The placement of the outreach at the end of our instructional unit helped to solidify students' learning. All of our 3rd and 4th grade teachers were extremely happy and impressed with all your students and their hard work. And I just thought, what a great thing now. They're taking their STEM knowledge and extending it into elementary, and I just thought I'd share that with you really quickly. Finally, going back to King Wrestling for a minute, I wondered if it might not be possible for us to just look into the possibilities for maybe a portable that might help them out as an interim. And I don't even know if that's a possibility, but I'm going to throw that out and ask that we look into that. And then the final thing, I wanted to give you all an art float update. We are doing great in art float. We have been to 6 schools already. They're painting spheres right and left. They're painting more spheres than I thought they could paint, which is really good. So our students are really good. This week we're at Lincoln and Woodcrest. And I was over at Lincoln this morning watching them set up the spheres, and the kids were really into it. And I was really excited to see the Lincoln kids so excited about painting the spheres. Because I know the little kids are all into it because it's a big, giant ball, right? But to have the high school kids be just as excited was pretty fun. Also, I want you to know we're a third of our way through underwriting all of the spheres, so we're off and running.
Congratulations, that's great.
Thanks to our CTA for help with all the paint, as well as Schools First. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Alavi, and thanks for taking that on. It's a very cool community project. I love it. Mr. Hunt, you only had a few moments with us, but I'm sure you have some comments.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, first of all, if anybody from the Indio CHP shows up, I've been here the entire time. So
Okay, got it.
been trying to get here. I'm sorry, I had a business appointment, and I had to.
It's okay.
From
Sometimes.
Scirocco here, I made it. I just want to say, I'm going to go back and watch your discussion and everything on SBAC. I was very impressed with Dr. Hansen showed me. And I think what it does for us as a board, and it's something personally, I've been looking for. I believe it is not just a reporting system. It needs to be a filter system for us here up at the dais. When Dr. Hansen and his cabinet bring us a new program, a new professional contract, what may, an expenditure, the question we need to ask is, great, how will this, and tell us how you intend for this to better the SBAC scores. How is this going to help what we're doing? And I mean that in a positive way, but whether that's middle college or it's the professional growth day that we just had, at Ramona and King, each one of these we need to look at and ask and hold it up against this prism to see how it's affecting. And I think it will make us a better management organization to do that. And lastly, I'm glad Mrs. Alavi brought up the King wrestling. I think it is something we need to address. I did ask Mr. San Martin if we could look into a sprung building, which a lot of colleges and folks use. I know when I helped CBU put together their first wrestling practice facility, it wasn't much wider than a couple of doubles. So they do it. It has a lot to do with the cleanliness and the health and all, but thank you for bringing that up. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. The only thing I have to say is it was a very busy, it seems like it's a lot going on the past couple weeks, but just a couple highlights I wanted to bring up. Long Night of Arts and Innovation. I know RUSD had a presence there. I know Ms. Salavi, you were there with your giant spheres. And I know I saw several other folks there too. And I also wanted to give recognition to one of our teachers, Miss Sherry Harris at Arlington High School, was honored by the Rivers and Lands Conservancy on Thursday night for her efforts at Envirothon. I don't know how many times she's gone on to nationals, but they did indeed win an international competition at some point, and I did not know that, but she's been a tremendous force there. And I think that was all I had I wanted to bring up today. Oh, okay. Why don't you say so, Dr. Hansen?
Thank you, Mrs. Lockdawson. Just a reminder to all of us that next Thursday, a week from this Thursday at the Convention Center, is our second annual State of the District. And I know that we've sent out hundreds of invitations, and the team's been working hard, and we Really look forward to sharing with the community all the great work that we're doing here in RSD. But that's next Thursday at the Convention Center, and that'll be a luncheon.
Thank you. And also, I did want to thank our fantastic staff, everybody out there, which I could call you all out by name. But something I love as a board member, and I think my other board members feel the same way, is we bring up problems, we bring up issues, and you bring us solutions. And the solutions always have the student at the center. And as a mom and a board member, those things are very important to me. So I really want to thank you, Dr. Hansen, for leading your team and not making it all about numbers either, but also making it about the whole employee and the whole student. So that's very important. I think we're doing great things here at RUSD, so thank you. In fact, I think you should give yourself a hand. And with that, I do want to close tonight in honor of the memory of Angela Gomez. Some of you may have known her. She died at the music festival shooting in Las Vegas. She was a Poly High School alumni who graduated with my daughter in 2015 and was currently enrolled at Riverside City College. She's working on her nursing degree. Our hearts and our love goes out to her parents and her family and all of her friends. So the least we can do tonight, I think, is close in her honor. So I would like to thank you all for coming tonight, and thanks for putting up with my ineptness on the mic. So thanks. We're adjourned.